So hello guys, welcome back to the second part of the PMDG 747 V3 Queen of the Skies 2 tutorial. Hope you're all doing well, and this part of the tutorial is going to cover the before start procedures, a couple of the pre-flight flows still to come, and the before start procedure, as well as engine start, pushback and the taxi procedure, and that is where we will get up to in today's video. So I can just hear some AI traffic departing. It's EasyJet A319. I wonder where that is going. We've completed boarding, so we can disconnect the jetway and shut all doors. Close all. And we'll arm all the doors as well. So we want to come to the EFIS panel, which is, it looks complicated, but it's quite simple when you get stuck into it. So this style here is to do with minimums, which is basically the lowest altitude you can get to on final approach to the landing airport. Basically it's the altitude you need to make a decision at, whether you're going to land or whether you're going to go around. So baro is barometric, and that's minimums is measured in feet above mean sea level. Radio is the same pretty much, except the altitude is measured above ground level. Flight path vector basically is a button that tells you your flight angle. I've not used it a lot, I don't normally use it, to be honest. Meters, again, you can see it for if you're flying in certain areas of the world. I know in parts of Asia, like Hong Kong, when you're departing out of Hong Kong and arriving in, you use meters to measure the altitude. As an example, you do need meters in some parts of the world. It's standard procedures for altitudes there, but we don't need it in Europe, so that's fine. Again, the barometer here, which is basically to do with the pressure outside the aircraft. It's all to do with air pressure. It can either be measured in inches of mercury or hectopascals. So you can see it's 1013 hectopascals is value of pressure at the moment. It's the standard amount. It's called QNH. This is also called QNH. This adjusts it. It's basically all to do with the air pressure. The 1013.25 hectopascals is standard atmospheric pressure, which is used above the transition altitude, just so all aircraft, obviously it's important that all aircraft cruising or at high altitudes have the same altitude indications, because it's all to do with air pressure, the readings here. Very dangerous for aircraft to fly with different QNHs at cruise, because you're supposed to maintain separation of 2 nautical miles vertically and horizontally. So to have differing altitudes differing indicated altitudes would be very dangerous at cruise levels and at high altitudes, especially when there's limited ATC. So that's what this style here is. VOR left or right, basically. VOR, ADF, VOR, I've touched on that before. It's basically a station on the ground that emits radio waves that you can tune into in the aircraft, and that can be used for navigation. And ADFs are, well, ADF is a type of radio which can tune into NDBs, which are non-directional beacons, which are kind of similar to VOR, but they're a bit different. They're used for navigation, they're used for similar purposes, but they're different. I normally stick both of the VORs on as they're more widely used. Again, simulator and normal procedures apply here. So I normally turn both of them on. We've got 7 buttons down here. terrain turns on, well, the terrain radar. So you can see terror is here. There's not too much gradient here. There's not really any steep pieces of relief around Stansted. As you can see, it's pretty flat land here in the southeast of England. But yeah, that's what that does. Position is, it basically gives your position on the map. Don't normally use it too much, but it's essentially just gives you an indication, gives you a little bit more information on the map about your current position. Data, it just adds, you should probably have that on. It basically just adds altitude constraints and for waypoints and the time you're expected to get there. It's quite useful. RPT, airports, any airports on the map, you might want to see them. BGSS as Stansted, we need that. WPT, oh there you go. It shows all the waypoints in your area. STA basically enables VORs and ADFs to be seen on the map. And WXR is the weather radar, which we won't use right now, and you don't want to use it on the ground because it emits microwaves, which can be quite harmful radiation for people on the ground. So you want to enable that when you're taxiing out to the runway, when there's no one directly in front, exposed to naked microwaves, I guess. So that's pretty much everything on the EFIS display in these dials. Basically all to do with, this is to do with the mode of ND here, so we want the map, which just is basically a live indication of where we are, and it'll move with the aircraft. The aircraft stays in this position as the triangle. You can adjust the headings and it moves. And then the plan we've seen before, it steps you through the route. VOR, it's kind of used for when you want to basically follow a certain track to a VOR or a certain radial away from it. And approach is all to do with, again, I believe it's using VORs. Actually, I think it's just, I don't normally use it. It's just to do, as you can see, the glide slope indicators here. It's just to do with your course on approach. So right now, we just want this on plan. We want to press TFC because that allows us to see traffic on the map. The TCAS is off, we will turn that on, but this traffic setting allows us to see that. And I'm going to put terrain data airport on this side and just airport, which is already on, and data, which is already on this side. So that concludes the EFIS. So now we want to put flight directors on, which basically enable the crosshairs on our PFD. As you can see, FD means the flight director is on, and these are basically when you lift up the yoke. So you have to rotate for this dot. Basically, you can see there's an artificial horizon here with the aircraft, the wings, the center of the aircraft, and the crosshairs are where you want to aim at for basically optimum climb and descent, essentially. You want to aim right in this middle spot, and you want this square to be in the middle, and this represents the plane, and this is the horizon. This is all to do with bank angle, this scale here. So we want that on both of our primary flight displays, and the bank angle selector is on auto. It's all to do with your maximum bank angle. You don't want to bank too steeply, obviously, but you want to bank at an optimal angle. Everything you want to do in an aircraft is, well, you want to do everything in as optimal a way as possible and as an efficient way, but also as safe a way as possible, which is the most important thing. And the disengage bar for the autopilot is up, so if we were to enable autopilot and this was down like this, the autopilot just wouldn't arm, but this turns off the autopilot. It's pretty self-explanatory. So we want to test the oxygen system now, so that is down here. You come down, there's an oxygen mask here, you pull down or just push this black bit here, and you should see the oxygen system test here. And once the yellow bit here goes back down, that's fine. It looks like we've got 100% oxygen. The clock, well, this is we're not running to any specified schedule. It's a slow-paced tutorial. Well, I hope it's slow-paced, so I hope it's intuitive or informative. But it's 12:41 Zulu, and that matches the current Greenwich Mean Time, as it is winter at the moment. At the time of recording, it's 12:41 Zulu. The nose wheel steering is fine. So now we want to check if the FMA is fine, which it is for our departure. Now the FMA is basically it's 3 boxes of information, and the information is relevant for various stages of flight. It's when you're in the air. So it's all to do with your engine setting. So, and thrust settings pretty much, as well as the MCP functions like the VNAV and the LNAV. Basically just tells you what is active at the top and what is armed below. So next we just want to look around the aircraft, have any last checks. We do want to check that our standby instruments are fine, and we also want to set our QNH for departure. So the local QNH is 1023, so you can set it as so by just right clicking the dial in this place. That looks good to me. Do the same on the first officer's side, it's already in place. And the standby instruments are fine. So everything is looking just fine so far. We want to set the auto brake to RTO, which is rejected takeoff, so in case we had to do a rejected takeoff, we would need the auto brakes to come into full force to stop the aircraft in time. You can just test the evacuation there. GPWS ground proximity warning system is all fine, which is just all to do with how low you, it's just basically the aircraft telling you you should pull up, or is basically just to do with how close you get to the ground and what the aircraft tells you. So we want to come to the speed brake. We want it to be completely down and not armed, which we can see it's in the disarm or the down position here. The reverse thrust levers are down here, and they're fully down, as well as the forward thrust levers, which are idle. So we want our flaps to be down fully, or up rather, and there will be an indicator that shows when you move the flaps. We've not enabled hydraulics, so we won't do the flaps just yet. That's when we're taxiing out, or just before taxi. There will be an indicator showing up when we move the flaps, but as you can see outside, they are fully raised. Parking brake should now be on. Stabilizer trim should cut out, should just be, the switches should be covered, they should be on normal. The engine start levers are in the cut-off position. And now we want to come to the pedestal. So the communication radios, our VHF radio can go to 122.8, which is Unicom on VATSIM. We're not flying on VATSIM, but it's good practice. The rudder trim is set at 0. Aileron trim, we can see it's at 0 here. And the no smoking signs are on. Flight deck door is locked. Seatbelt signs can be enabled. So the standard transponder code, or squawk, was 2000 when you're on ATC. You can test for TCAS.
TCAS test pass.
That's great. And the last thing we want to do down here, before I talk about ACARS, is the weather radar panel. And when the weather radar comes on, this will be set. But we normally want WX plus T on top and bottom, which basically just allows, when we enable over weather radar, we can see turbulence on the navigation display, which is always useful to see. So coming down to ACARS, ACARS are basically just, they're not quintessential, they're not essential in flight sim, but when you're dealing with VATSIM, they're quite helpful and they're nice. It's basically a data link between FMCs of pilots and air traffic control. So it's similar to what we've already inserted in the FMC. So origin is Echo Golf Sierra Sierra. Destination is Echo Golf Papa Kilo. Estimated time of departure looks like it's going to be about, well, departure is when we come off the blocks, so that's going to be about 1 o'clock when we come off the chocks when we're about to go, so that's probably going to be 1300 Zulu. Airline ID is BA, I believe. It's just the airline one, not the call sign. Estimated time en route on the flight plan, it says, will be en route for 1 hour 1 minute. So 000101. Data link connect. So without further ado, looks like everything is set up and we're ready for the pre-flight checklist. So oxygen is tested 100% and navigation transfer and display switches are normal and auto. That's all these dials here. Window heat, we turned that on. Pressurization mode selector is automatic. The heading and altimeter are working and synced up to the IRS's. Parking brake set and the engine start levers are cut off. So all the doors are closed and armed. The flight deck door is closed and locked. We can set the right hand CDU to takeoff and the left hand to legs. And the N1 reference bugs, which is the lines here for our D rates, the acceptance EPER in the 747 are fine here. Our V2 speed is set in the IAS/MAC selector. We can arm the LNAV and VNAV, which is lateral and vertical navigation respectively. It's basically the autopilot. You can see the both arms there, and they will arm once we're in the air. Basically, LNAV follows our set route, so it's laterally, and VNAV follows our altitude profile, which we programmed in the FMC. In the heading selector, I'll select the runway heading. Which at London Stansted is 222. The first altitude we need to be at is 4,000 feet, so we'll set that there, so we won't go any higher than that. So now we want to turn on the fuel pumps to allow fuel to be pumped to the relevant areas of the aircraft. We want to enable the electrically driven hydraulic pumps to allow, well, basically to allow hydraulics to flow around the aircraft, and so that we can move the flight control surfaces, and the fuel pumps are of course for the engines, the APU, just so that fuel reaches them. So we now want to check that the hydraulic pressure is roughly 2,800 psi. So we can go to the status page here, and we can see that hydraulic pressure is around 3,000 or 2,800, which is what we'd like. So we can blank this display by pressing the same button again, and we can also check the brake pressure gauge, which we can see is roughly 3,000 as well. PSI, which is pounds per square inch, it's a unit of pressure measurement, so that's what we want. So we can now enable, or rather turn on, the anti-collision light as a beacon light to both, and that allows people on the ground to see that we are about to start engines imminently. We can get rid of the jetway. So the elevator trim is set, and so are the aileron and rudder trim, so we can see the rudder trim is 0 here, and we would just turn this dial to the left or right to trim the rudder to the right or left. We can look here and see that the 0 is at the center of our yoke, which shows that the aileron is trimmed to 0. So we can now conduct the before start checklist. We could also request pushback from GSX. So before start checklist: flight deck door is locked, closed and locked, fuel pumps are on, passenger signs, you can turn them on, as well as no smoking signs. MCP, we've got the V2, the heading, the altitude. We've also got our takeoff speeds, V1, V2 and V rotate, or V1, V rotate and V2.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback.
The rudder and aileron trim is 3 and 0. The CDU pre-flight is completed. Taxi and takeoff briefing is also completed, and the anti-collision light is on. That completes the before start checklist. So now we want to select right, as we want to push back to the right here. Then we want to taxi. From here, push back to the right, taxi along this taxiway here, then all the way along here, then go where this Ryanair is going and turn onto the entrance point to the runway, and we'll take off and depart via runway 22. So we want to remove the wheel chocks. so to allow pushback to commence. So we remove them and we can start what is called the block time, which is basically the time from when we remove the chocks at the departure airport to when we reapply the chocks at the arrival airport. So we can start this block time here and go back to the FMC and
release parking brakes.
We can now release the parking brakes once we have turned off the packs to allow engine start. So the engines can start as well. We can enable the secondary
Release
engine
parking
page
brakes.
on the MFD here, and now we can release the parking brake. So
Commencing push.
we want to start engines
All
3 and 4
engines clear.
first, so we
Start at
select
will.
very simply 3 and 4 engine start switches, and we want to start the fuel flow by flipping these switches here. This lever should be in the idle position. Start to see engines 3 and 4 spooling up nicely here, and we can check the readings. So N1, N2, and 3 are the various interior fans of the engine, so you can see the speeds start to come alive. So, and the exhaust gas temperature is coming up. That will come up to around 380, 400, and then come down to about 280. And then the fuel flows will go up to 0.6, so we can see that here. And EPR is going to 1.01, that's what we want at this moment. And N1 will go up to around 20. So once these buttons stop being illuminated, we can now check that our engines 3 and 4 are stable. The values are still increasing. EGT is coming down to around 280. N1 is just coming up to around, it's usually around the 22 mark, and that looks stable to me. So 1, 2, you can see we have an auto start function here enabled, which just means that we can start the fuel flow at any point after we've started the engine, rather than introducing it at 25% N1, for example, which is what we do in the 737.
Waiting your confirmation
So,
for good engine start.
basically, the fuel starts flowing into the engine automatically, so we just need to watch them start up and make sure that nothing's going wrong. So, once again, similar process for engines 1 and 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 and 4 started. So for 1 and 2 we can see the EGT, exhaust gas temperature, is starting to come up towards 300 initially. N1 is starting to come up gradually towards 22, and EPR is 1.01. Fuel flow is gradually climbing up to 0.6. Ryanair taking off there. Here are the wonderful Rolls-Royce RB211 engines. That's the engine start switch is clicking. So that's the engines started. And we just need to cross-check that they are stabilizing in all fields. There'll be oil pressure and oil temperature as well in the engine, and quantity too, and the vibration as well of the fans. So we can confirm a good engine start, everything's stabilized, I'm happy with that. So now we can start to tidy up the aircraft and do our before taxi procedure. So the engine generators, they are on, so we're now relying on engine power. The wing and engine anti-ice, so nacelle anti-ice, that's anti-ice around the engines, and the wing anti-ice can be enabled as it's
Unlocking
0 degrees Celsius outside, I believe, at Stansted here today. And
tow truck disconnected.
we can also
Bypass
get
bin
the
removed.
packs to auto now the engines have started, or normal as they are in the 747. Isolation valves are as required. APU bleed can come off. APU itself can come off as we're now on engine power and we don't need the APU. The engine start switch can come to continuous, which is as standard for departure and arrival. engine start levers are idle. We can set flaps to our takeoff position, so 1, 5, then up to 10, and we can see that the indicator here on the engine display here is going towards 10. Flaps are slowly extending according to this bar here, and you can see the flaps are extending outside. So at this point we can do the flight control check, which is checking our flight control surfaces have full travel to either side and that they go back to the neutral position once we have basically stopped manipulating them. So we go to the status page here. We can see a nice overview of our flight controls. So we want to go the ailerons, the spoilers, the elevator and the rudder. So the ailerons are these things here, which allow the aircraft to bank, to roll essentially, and the spoilers also allow the aircraft to slow down in the air and on the ground as well when travelling at high speeds initially. So we want to check that these fully extend to the left, to the right, and then they go back to neutral. The spoilers and the ailerons and then the elevator. We can see are here, elevator is here on either fin. Want to check that goes full down and full up. So elevator, full up, full down, neutral, and the rudder, which is here in the nose wheel. Want to check that that performs a full travel to the left and the right, then goes back to neutral. So elevator allows us, the aircraft, to move vertically up and down, and rudder allows us to yaw to the left and right. So essentially turn to the left and right on the ground. So we can blank this display by pressing the status button again. Flight control check is completed. Flight controls are calibrated and fine. The transponder can go to altitude reporting only, which will allow air traffic control to see us on their radar on the ground. So we can also do the before taxi checklist. So the generators are on, anti-ice is as required, engine start switch is continuous, auto brake is rejected takeoff, so RTO, engine start levers are idle, flight controls are checked, and ground equipment is clear. As you can see, no ground equipment. So we can now get the runway turn-off lights on. Just our taxi lights for today, as the 747 doesn't have a designated taxi light. Release the parking brake and get on our way. So we want to taxi at no more than 15 knots. So I'll execute the plan for the taxi. Going to just allow the engines to warm up for the first sort of 2 minutes of the taxi, and then we'll enable the weather radar. That's a little bit too fast. We do not want to enable the weather radar, as I said, at the gate, because we don't want to fry people with the microwaves that it uses. So then yaw to the right. This is a long aircraft, so we just want to be wary of that. Get the weather radar on now. Terrain radar is on the right hand side. And we can yaw to the left following this Ryanair aircraft 737. Slow down a bit for the turn. Make sure we don't get too close to this Ryanair. We can do the before takeoff checklist now. So the flaps are position 10 and the green light here, indicating that they're fully extended and ready. We won't actually follow this Ryanair into its holding point since we want as much of a runway as possible. So we are a 747, category Delta aircraft, and a heavy aircraft at that as well. So we'll just make sure there's no wing strike between our aircraft and the 737, sorry. And that's fine. We can now just taxi to our holding point, just short of runway 22. So there's nothing to our left as we'd expect. So we'll now just yaw to this taxiway here. So the procedures that I'm about to do now can be done during the taxi, but it's quite a short taxi here at Stansted and we need to wait for this traffic to depart. So I shall run you through what we need to do here. So just when the traffic's departed and we're ready to go onto the runway, we will turn on the strobe light, which will be the flashing lights here where the nav lights currently are on left and right wing of the aircraft, just indicating that we are essentially going to be airborne. Well, the nav light, the strobe lights are basically used essentially just alert our presence of aircraft in the air, but also on the ground as well, to indicate that we're going to be in the air imminently. So what we want to do now is to set the transponder to TARA, so our altitude reading can now be seen by ATC. And the approach path is not clear, as we can see there's an aircraft at 1,300 feet on final approach to runway 22 here at Stansted. So we shall wait for that aircraft to land and for this Ryanair aircraft to taxi and take off onto the runway, and I will be back with you guys when we are ready for departure.